Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Lisa with Lisa Cape and Quilts, and today we are doing the applique for the Snowflake. This is going to be so much fun. I hope you grab this pattern while it's free. After December the 22nd, this PDF tracing template will be in the Etsy shop along with the cutting files that are already there. So if you have a cutting machine and you want to cut out a whole bunch of these snowflakes really easily and quickly, there is a cutting file for this snowflake. Before we get started today, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update because I took like a 2-week break. It's been about 2 weeks since I've seen you, and I took a break so I could care after Harlan, who had knee surgery. And I just wanted to give you an update. He is doing fabulous. Okay, so a little bit about his knee surgery. He tore his meniscus, we thought, in 2 places. He's been in a lot of pain for quite some time, right? Tried physical therapy to hopefully heal it for months, and it never got better. It only got worse. And finally, he was like, okay, I'm going to have surgery. And the surgery was to repair the 2 tears in the meniscus. One was going this way and one was going this way. And the hope was having it repaired would give him the best mobility of his knee. Y'all, he is an active man. He is on and off tractors. He is up and down in the back of his truck. He is hunting. He is fishing. He is kayaking. He is gardening. He is looking after chickens and building coops and all kinds of stuff. He is so active. So he had chosen the route of repairing the meniscus with the hope that it would give him the best mobility, right, and the use of his knee. Y'all, when he sits on the floor, he sits on his feet. He did Taekwondo for years. I don't know how he does it. But anyway, he wanted to have the meniscus repaired. That meant a very long, probably painful recovery. We were looking at 12 weeks on full crutches. No walking around without crutches for 12 weeks, right? And if you know Harlan, that he was not looking forward to that, and quite frankly, neither was I. But that's what he was willing to do to have his meniscus repaired, right? And physical therapy every day for who knows how long. Well, surgery day, they went in and they discovered a 3rd tear that kind of went diagonal through the other 2 tears. And at that point, the damage was too bad to repair. Chances are, had they tried it, it would have torn again in the repair, and he would have had to go back in for another surgery. So they removed the meniscus, right? And the surgery for removing the meniscus is recovery-wise much easier. No crutches. He might have to do physical therapy. We'll find out Thursday. But the pain, he said immediately, even the very next day, that the pain was way worse than before he had surgery, because he was dealing with quite a bit of pain, right? So he is doing fabulous. So the downside of just having the meniscus removed, the recovery is much easier, but he will have less mobility with his knee. And as he ages, like we're looking probably at a knee replacement in his mid-60s, his doctor thinks, and we'll see when we get there, right? But he is doing fabulous. No crutches. He is hunting and walking around and doing all kinds of stuff. So he is doing quite well. That's an update on how Harlan's doing. I know many of you have reached out and asked me, but in case you were wondering. Now today, we're going to jump right into the snowflake, but before we do, I just want to show you this weekend. Today, this video is airing on Friday. Tomorrow, Saturday, look for a video for the snowman Trivet. I just got done filming this video. He is adorable. Isn't that adorable? Perfect size trivet for casseroles, all kinds of dishes. Very festive, and you'll have a little bit of time to make this if you want to do it in time for a Christmas party, right? Or as a Christmas present. That's the back of the trivet. Isn't that super cute? So this video will air tomorrow. This is not a free pattern, y'all. The Snowflake is for a week, but this one is going directly in the Etsy shop. Patreon members, this is your free pattern for December, right? Y'all got the download a couple weeks ago. I'm just now getting to making the video. This year has just been so crazy, right? But yeah, you might want to check that out, and it's a lot of fun to make. The Snowflake Applique. Let's say you wanted to make a winter-themed quilt. Do you want to see what this one applique would look like if you just made a whole bunch of blocks using this one applique? Let's pull that up on the screen. Isn't that so pretty? Now, y'all, my favorite thing to do is raw edge applique in my quilt making, right? And so this looks like a lot of fun to me. It took about 45 seconds, maybe less, to cut this snowflake out on my Scan and Cut. So, of course, having a cutting machine would speed up the process of cutting out this applique, but in the PDF, you do have a tracing template. And I think, you know, it would take only a few minutes to cut this applique out. I don't know. I cut very slowly. But for sure, the Scan and Cut sped up the process. But this looks like a quilt that I would like to make one day, right? Same block, just repeated lots of times. I think it's 20 times to make this quilt, right? I always like to show just a little example. But today, I'm going to be making a trivet. And the easiest, probably the most easiest possible way to make a trivet using this applique pattern. Okay, so you're ready to get started. Let's come on over to the pressing board, and you'll see me, I'm keeping an eye on my timer. I have some bread proofing in the microwave right now. So I'm keeping an eye on the timer and try not to go over my time. Here we go. I have some little instructions for the trivet to help myself remember. So here's my applique, y'all. I cut this out on the Scan and Cut. So she's all ready to go. It's just a one-piece applique. That's what she looks like all cut out, right? So this week in the PDF, because it's just one piece of applique, the placement guide is the same as your template, right? Because that template will not fit on a standard letter size piece of paper. So when you cut out your placement guide, we don't really need it for placement. It's just one piece. Instead, we're using this once you've bonded these 4 pieces together as our tracing template. So if you're cutting out by hand, you'll put these 4 pieces together and trace and cut out your snowflake shape. I keep wanting to say star. It's not a star. But that's your snowflake piece, right? So at this point, if you were making a quilt block, you're ready just to find the center and center it right on there and fuse it down and start stitching, right? Well, I'm not going to make mine into a quilt block. Instead, I'm going to make this into another trivet that I can use at Christmas time, which is only like a week away. So yeah, I'm going to hold off on fusing this to my background piece. So let's talk about the background piece. I have a piece of tea-stained muslin that I did starch and press, right? So it's got a little bit of body to it. It's not super stiff, but it's stiffer than the fabric by itself just pressed. What I did, now this muslin, I can use either side. But if you're using a patterned piece of fabric for your trivet, let's say you want to make the same trivet I'm making, right? If you're using a patterned piece of paper, flip it over to the back side of the fabric. I traced my 12.5-inch ruler on the back side of this fabric, right? And I just traced myself a little outline, okay? So this is the back side that I'm working with. Then I cut myself a piece that's slightly bigger than that for the back of my trivet. And then I have 2 pieces of warm and natural batting. Y'all, it's the batting I have the most scraps of. That's what I'm using. You could use Insulbrite or any of those other kinds of heat-resistant batting if you want to. I'm using what I have lots of. So I have 2 layers of warm and natural batting. So here's what I'm going to do to make this super duper easy trivet. I have my 2 layers of batting. I'm going to put my back fabric for my trivet facing up, right? The right side of the fabric is facing up. The right side of the top of my trivet is facing down. This is the back side. We're going to just center that right in place. And I want to cut myself a little opening. So I'm going to kind of try to figure out, without fusing this in place, where I want that placement to be. Right in the center is a solid space in that applique. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a heat erasing pen and I'm just going to mark myself a little bit of a placement so that when I take off that snowflake, I know about where the center is going to cover. And I'm going to take my seam ripper. Where did it go? There it is. Y'all, if you're doing it like this, that opening is going to have to remain within that space, right? It's not like when we have a big piece of applique that's going to cover an opening. I'm going to cut a small little slit. I'm going to start small and tiny. See that little slit right in the center? That's going to be the opening where we turn everything right side out. And it's going to prevent me from having to close an opening along the edge. So there we go. I'm going to pin these layers together. Now my back is kind of twisted out. I'm trying to be really careful because I feel like at any minute, all it's going to take is for me to just turn the wrong way and my back is going to be fully out. Have you ever been like that before? It is not fun. I'm trying to be super careful. I really just want to put a couple of pins here and there just to keep these layers from shifting as we're sewing. I'm going to start on this side, so I'm not going to put a pin there. So I'm going to bring this over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew right on that traced line, the same line I traced my 12.5-inch ruler with, right? So let's bring that on over here. And I'm going to choose a straight stitch. Now my default straight stitch is set at a length of 2.4. I'm going to go ahead and use that stitch length 2.4 and I'm gonna just start right here. Yeah. I like to just start right here in the middle. Gonna lower that needle right on that line. Where'd that thread go? That's really long. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do a back stitch right now because when I come all the way around, I'm going to pass where I start by a few stitches and then I'll do a back stitch and cut the thread then. All I'm doing at this point is stitching right on this line all the way around this box. So we've gone all the way around and I'm back to right where we started. I'm just going to pass that down to about right here and then do a back stitch. There we go. Let's bring this over to the pressing board. I dropped a pin. I see it. I'll get that as soon as we're done. All right, so here we go. I can remove these pins. And we're done with that. And you could use a rotary cutter, right? And a ruler and just trim away all the extra. I'm just going to use these scissors right here. I like to cut my corners sort of close like that. Remove those corners. And then I'm going to cut away all the extra fabric, leaving a pretty small seam allowance. I say even probably smaller than 1/4 of an inch. Not much smaller, but a little smaller. That's just me. With the 2 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting, that seam allowance is pretty thick. And I don't like to have all that bulkiness along the edge of my trivet, so I make that seam allowance a little bit smaller. Now, if you are using this Snowflake Applique and making a quilt block, y'all, there are all kinds of stitches you could use to sew it down, right? If you choose to use a satin stitch with just your block fabric, you might want to use a stabilizer underneath to prevent any puckering from happening, right? But I feel like a blanket stitch would be pretty okay to stitch down your applique with just your block fabric and no stabilizer. All right, so there's all of my edges cleaned up, and I'm going to try to just open this opening just a little bit more, but again, we want to be really careful that that opening doesn't spread beyond that line, and that line would disappear, but it's also going to be on the back side, right? I just don't want that opening to extend beyond that space right there. So I'm going to just try to be really careful. I'm going to reach in and start pulling all of this right side out. And she's a little bit stiffer because I did starch this top fabric that my snowflake is going to be fused to. I really did that because I only thought about the trivet idea after I starched that fabric. But it's okay. Ooh, see, I hear a little ripping. I'm just trying to be really careful. It's a lot to bring through that opening. And I'm just trying to be careful. Ooh, did you hear that? I've never been a graceful person when it comes to turning my stuff right side out anyway. I would say of every project I do, this is my least favorite part. Anytime I have to turn something right side out, I'm like, oh, that's my least favorite thing. Plus you have 2 layers of batting if you're making this a trivet like I am. So that's a lot to pull through there, especially trying to be careful and not stretch that opening out. I feel like I should tell a story. How about I just fast forward this part? Now, I'm not going to lie, that was not the easiest thing to do. But, you know, I've never had the easiest time turning things. Y'all know that. Of course, you might hear Poppy in the background. I gave him toys, but he's probably already destroyed them. And believe it or not, he can hear me talking even with my door shut. So he thinks I'm having a conversation with someone, and he is not a part of it. So you might hear him in the background. Now I'm just reaching in and I'm pushing out these corners. And then I'm going to find my chopstick. Which I had earlier, and I don't know what I did with it. Hold on 1 second. Oh. It was right next to my pressing board. I'm going to reach in with my chopstick and just sort of poke out these corners a little bit, right? But what's nice about this trivet is I don't have a binding or a closing along the edges, right? But you could certainly make a trivet like a traditional quilt, right? And you could put this applique on your quilt layers and just add a traditional binding to this trivet, which would finish it off really nicely as well. Or you could make your back a little bit bigger than the top, and then use the back as a binding if you wanted to make this trivet with a binding, but that would save you a little bit of time, right? Just poking out those corners just a little bit. And I like to run this chopstick right along those edges. See how it just sort of pokes them out a little bit neater. And then I'm going to give this a little bit of a press, and we're just going to sort of flatten out all of the edges. And hopefully I didn't make that opening too big. I'm just going to pull all that right back in. Just like that. Oh, I have a black thread in there. Let me pull that out because that will show through my muslin. And let's give this all a press. Now I am using a tiny bit of steam, but you don't have to. I just feel like this iron gets hotter when you use a little bit of steam. But see how nice those edges finish off? And you know what? I'm going to give the inside of this a little bit of a press too, just so it lays down nice and flat. There we go. See, it just flattened that right out. Now we can bring in the snowflake, and I'm going to center it right over top of that opening. And the good news is I did not make it any bigger than that center piece of the applique. So when I sew this applique down, it's going to permanently seal that opening. Now I feel like, how do we want to situate this? Like that? Now I'm just eyeballing it, right? You could get real technical and sort of measure out and make sure it's perfectly centered, right? But I'm just going to eyeball it. Something like that. And I have an easier time if I look at it on the screen. Let's just scoot it like this just a little bit. That looks really good, right? I'm going to go ahead and just fuse this right down in place. Now I think, y'all, I think I'm going to use a free motion stitch. You could use a blanket stitch. That would be lovely. A satin stitch would be very time consuming, but would be lovely. A zigzag stitch would be faster than a satin stitch because it's spaced out a little bit, right? And that would be lovely. But today, I think I'm just going to do a free motion stitch, which basically means I'm going to be stitching close to the edge of each one of these raw edges, right? But to me, that's going to be so much faster. What that does mean is that the raw edges of all of these snowflake areas, right? That's including the outside edge and these inside edges, might fray over time using this either as a quilt, right? Or as a trivet. The raw edges might fray a little bit. I feel like it's going to be less fraying because it does have the heat and bond light on the backside, which acts as a little bit of a fray check, right? But it's possible that my edges might fray using the free motion stitch, right? If you don't ever want your edges to fray, I would not use the free motion stitch. Instead, I would use like a zigzag or a satin stitch, right? So let me bring this over to the sewing machine. Look, the back is going to be nice and clean. No opening on the back side. And when I sew down my snowflake, I'm not only sewing down the applique, but I'm quilting my trivet all at the same time. So let me switch this foot from my open toe foot to my free motion foot, and I'll be right back. Okay, here we are at the sewing machine. You'll see I have my free motion foot on. I have made my life so much easier today. I have the same color thread in the bobbin. It's the same exact thread, like a navy blue in the bobbin and a navy blue up in the top. And for my machine, I'm just selecting a straight stitch. I'm going to lower the stitch length to a 0. And you could lower the feed dogs. I like to do free motion with the feed dogs just the way they are. If you're doing free motion or trying it on your machine and your feed dogs do not lower, you don't have that option, you might want to check for like a little plastic cover that you can cover your feed dogs. Or you could try it like I do, and I don't do anything with my feed dogs. I have found that I get the best tension when I just leave the feed dogs doing what they're doing. So I don't bother dropping the feed dogs with this particular machine. And yeah, I'm gonna just set the height of my free motion foot. It is adjustable. I don't want the height of my foot, I don't want it to drag on my trivet as we're stitching along. I want to be able to easily move everything underneath, but I also don't want to raise it up too high because that height affects your tension when you're stitching, right? So I don't want it too high. There we go, and I'm going to pick a place and just get started. And I thought it would be fun just to bring you along, but I am going to just fast forward this. So it's just going to be like a sped up version of some free motion stitching for you today, okay? Now I know oftentimes I get questions, and this is one of the questions. When I start, I'm going to do a couple of little stitches. You might not even see them, especially since it's going to be sped up. A couple little tiny stitches back and forth. That's going to lock my stitches in place. When I stop, I'm going to do the exact same thing before I just move over and start stitching again. Each time I move, start and stop, I would take those little stitches so I don't have to worry about them coming undone. through using my trivet or washing my trivet. Okay. All right, let's get started. Bringing up that bobbin thread, holding both of those threads, and now we can start stitching. One other thing before I get started stitching. I feel like a motor mouth. The size needle I'm using today is a 90-14 because I'm going through fabric, heat and bond light, another fabric, 2 layers of batting, and another fabric. So I do have a larger needle that I'm stitching with today. Now, I don't know if you see it or not. Like, what I see in person, oftentimes when I watch the video back, looks way different than what I see on screen versus in person. But as I'm quilting down these center little parts of the snowflake, I'm noticing this beautiful quilting texture right here. And as I worked around like all the inside, once I stitched the outside edge, this was sort of baggy and loose looking, right? But as I stitch around each one of these shapes on the inside of the snowflake, things are really starting to pull in tighter and be less baggy and have a very beautiful quilted finish. Like, I don't know if you see how baggy and loose this is right here. This is the last one I have left to stitch versus this right here, right? I love it when you start quilting within your quilt and you start to see things just sort of come together and look nice and neat. And I'm just going to do this last one with you, so maybe you'll see. She looks a little baggy. And I'm just going to start right here. And you'll see when I'm stitching, because my hands are shaky, I have an easier time getting more straighter lines going back and forth versus diagonal. So you'll see me do a lot of turning of my stuff, and that's mainly why. I can do a straighter line going front to back or back to front versus diagonal. Couple little stitches to lock it. See, it's just starting to tighten up a little bit on that side. See how this is still a little baggy right there? But everything is starting to tighten up right around that shape. Isn't that just awesome? Nice and neat. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and just cut the thread. The inside is a little poofy, and inside each one of these shapes is a little poofy, which I love that quilty texture, right? Let's bring her on over. You think, you know, when you first think, oh, a snowflake, that should be really quick to sew down, right? But, oh, the sun's coming in a different way. Yeah, it's one shape, but when you really start to sew it, you start to realize all the surface that you have to sew down, right? It's not only just along the outside of each one of these little snowflakey tips, right? But you also have the inside of each one of these shapes that you have to sew down too. This is a new sun direction. This whole year since we've been here has been a discovery of the sun is always shifting. Different parts of the day look different in my studio from one day to the next, it seems like. This is a new direction for the sun to come through. There we go. So we have a little bit of a sun bright spot in the shadow, but doesn't that look so pretty, right? Super pretty. And on the back, of course, my navy thread is going to blend in right with that black. So you're not going to see my stitching so much on the back on this particular project, right? But I'm just going to trim these little jump stitches. And then you know what? This trivet is going to be ready to use for our Christmas party when the family comes. And no edges to turn and to close. I love that. So there's my trivet using the snowflake. Isn't that so pretty? My Nana would have loved the polka dots. I hope you make this. If you do, whether you're making it into a quilt, right? Making quilt blocks with this applique design, or if you're going to make a trivet like I did with it, maybe you sew it onto a sweatshirt for Christmas, you know, or to wear during the winter time. Whatever you do with the applique, because throughout this whole series, we've talked about a million different ways you could use applique, not just in quilts, right? And I've demonstrated some of the different ways, even on a t-shirt one time I showed you, with a domestic sewing machine. So if you didn't see that, scroll through the series. I do have a link down in the description box for this series playlist, and you can go through and watch all of the different appliques we've done. Now, you know what? I think this is the last applique we're going to do for a little while. I want to start a mystery quilt in the new year, and I need some time to plan that. I need some time to plan it, to design the quilt. I have a wonderful idea in mind, but that takes work and that takes time. And I think we're going to take a little bit of a break of doing projects together weekly until I can get that design up and running with a good solid plan to start a mystery quilt with you in 2024. But that doesn't mean we're not going to meet. So here's what we're going to do. Y'all, the internet's still crazy. I don't see that changing anytime before Verizon comes down this end where we are. The power goes out on a regular basis here. Come to find out, we have a whole house generator, not because of storms coming through, which is a great possibility, but it's because the power goes out down here so much. Everybody, come to find out, has generators because the power goes out so much. But when the power goes out, so does the internet. It is all so unpredictable. And when the lines go down, it takes some time for that internet to be right. I mean, these are all things we're learning as we live here. So the internet is not trustworthy. Like, I used to come on live Fridays and we'd do the whole project together live. and it would be slow, or it would be fine, or I'd be all stressed out because I'm resetting modems 5 minutes before trying to gain some speed. I don't want that kind of stress in my life anymore. But what I am going to try to do is come live next Friday, and we're just going to chit chat. I feel like if we're just talking and I lose internet, or I lose power, or it's slow, you're not missing anything, right? But if I'm sewing this snowflake and all of a sudden the internet acts up or we lose power, you're not missing any instructions in a project, right? If we just disappear for a minute, you're not missing any instructions. So I feel like for the good foreseeable future, oh, my bread's ready to take out. I'm going to try to come live on Fridays, and we're just going to chit chat. We're not doing projects. Y'all, I've done like, I don't know how many projects this year, and to be really honest, I am almost out of ideas. I don't have many more ideas. And I just feel like the next few Fridays, let's just come and do a live chat, hangout. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them to my best ability, right? I don't have all the answers, but if I can help, I will. And I can just check in with you and see how you're doing, and it'll give us a place to hang out. So, yeah, I'll see you next Friday, which will be like the day before Christmas Eve, or 2 days before Christmas Eve. I don't know the date, the 22nd. It'll be right before Christmas. And we'll just get together noon Eastern Standard Time next Friday. No project, just chatting, and we'll check in with you right before Christmas, right? I'll consider that my Christmas party. Since it's just me working by myself every day, that'll be my Christmas party, is to hang out with you live next Friday. Again, no project. But at least, you know, if I'm slow, I feel like that'll be less stressful for me, because you won't be missing anything except for me just talking. Okay, everybody, share pictures of your snowflakes. Make sure to get it while it's free. And the cutting file is already on Etsy if you want to quickly cut out the snowflake. Have fun with this, and I'll see you next, well, check out my snowman trivet video tomorrow, Saturday. And I'll see you like this next Friday, except we'll try a live, okay? Bye, everybody.